Have you ever wondered why some people find it easier to learn new things and remember them in the long term? By the end of this video, you will know why. In 2014, a study was conducted at Princeton University between two groups. Both groups attended the same lectures and were asked to take notes throughout the semester. One group was asked to use the old-fashioned way of pen and paper, and the other group was free to choose which electronical device they wanted to use. While the first group struggled with cramps in their hands to write down the most important information, the second group was able to type out their notes comfortably and without much effort. At the end of the first lecture, the results of the two groups were compared. The result? Group 2 had been able to write down almost twice as much information as Group 1 by the end of the lesson. This, of course, led to some complaints from Group 1, because while Group 1 had to deal with the time-consuming paperwork, Group 2 was able to use a much more efficient way to record notes. Then, at the end of the semester, the actual goal of the study was announced. Well, to the students' surprise, the goal of the study was not to find out which medium could capture more information in a given amount of time, but the study was to find out which method of taking notes would allow you to remember more of what was taught in the end of the semester. For the outcome of the study, the researchers looked at the overall scores of the students in that class. And to their surprise, the students who took notes using the old-fashioned way of pen and paper method did twice as well as the students who used their laptops. Needless to say, the researchers were more than shocked by this huge difference. And it had them thinking. Maybe the group that did their transcripts by hand was somehow made to learn outside of the lecture than the second group. So, the study was done 2 more times. But this time, adjustments were made. In the first study, each group was tested immediately after lecture. By doing this, the researchers wanted to make sure that the students didn't have time to learn the notes. In the second study, the researchers had asked each group to take notes from the lectures again. But this time, instead of giving a test right after the lecture, the students were given a surprise test a week after they had taken the notes. But how did the groups perform this time? The result was that in both studies, students who took the notes by hand performed about twice as well as students who typed their notes. But what does that mean for us? To summarize, the more effort you put into capturing a piece of information, the better you will be able to retain it. And I am convinced that this concept is very important for our personal development. Look, on the subject of personal development or general self-improvement, there are tons of informations out there. There are hundreds of thousands of books, videos, and podcasts. You can spend countless hours consuming this information, but the problem is, it's all pointless if you can't remember any of it and internalize the lessons. I, myself, am a huge fan of audiobooks and podcasts. I listen them at home while I'm doing my chores, I listen to them while I'm exercising, and I listen to them on the subway on the way back and forth from work. But what I have learned over time is that listening alone is not very effective. I have to honestly admit that I have often found myself listening to an entire book, and a week or 2 weeks later I could barely remember any of the most important lessons. That's why I ask myself the question, what can I do to remember the most important lessons from the books, even years later? My solution? A small notepad. I bought myself a notepad that is slightly smaller than my smartphone, so I can always carry it with me. I've made it a habit to take notes in the most important parts whenever I listen to an audiobook. So when I am listening to a book and I have an aha moment, a moment when it clicks in my head like a light switch and something makes sense to me, which is a turning point for me. Moments that I want to remember and hold on to in my head. Then I get out my little notepad and write it down. For example, a few weeks ago, I was listening to Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki at the gym and had an aha moment when he talked about how the rich invent money. So I put my weights down, paused the audiobook, got out my little notepad and pen and wrote down the key lessons to write a short summary of what it was all about. Looking back now, I do put a lot more effort into memorizing the most important information than just listening to the audiobook. But that's also exactly why all the lessons from the book stuck in my head. And another advantage is that if I ever wanted to review the lessons, I can find them all summarized in my notepad. But if I really want to internalize all the lessons, here's what I do. I make more of an effort by mentioning them in conversation. I have a few friends who are also striving for their personal development, and when I spend time with them, I briefly talk about some of the new lessons and concepts I've recently come across. The moment you teach what you have learned to others, you put even more effort into it, which leads to retaining the information even better. To summarize, the more effort you put into the lessons, the better and more effectively you will be able to internalize them. If you also have any tips on how to remember certain things better, please write it down in the comments section and let me know if the video helped you. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any more videos.